What would you do if in the middle of a bright afternoon surrounded by laughter, clinking glasses, and the illusion of safety, danger decided to test the wrong person? Stay with me, because this isn't just a story about a restaurant by the water. It's about the kind of strength that doesn't shout, the kind that waits quietly until it's needed, and when it rises, it changes the atmosphere of an entire room in seconds. The sun was blazing over the harbor in Santa Monica that day, pouring molten gold through the massive glass walls of a popular seaside restaurant called the Mariner's Table. The place was alive in that effortless, California way, executives discussing contracts over grilled salmon, couples taking selfies with sailboats drifting in the background, and off-duty service members relaxing in groups, their laughter rising above the steady murmur of conversation. Seagulls circled lazily outside, their distant cries blending with the rhythm of waves tapping against the docks. It felt like one of those afternoons where nothing truly bad could happen, where daylight itself acted as a shield. At a small corner table near the window sat a woman named Lieutenant Alina Reese. She wore simple civilian clothes, dark jeans, a fitted charcoal blouse, and low heels, but there was something unmistakably composed about her. Her posture was straight but not rigid, her movements economical, her awareness subtle but constant. Her black hair was tied into a low bun, and her navy blazer rested neatly over the back of her chair. She ate slowly, methodically, as if she had all the time in the world. If anyone glanced her way, they would see only a quiet woman enjoying a late lunch alone. What they wouldn't see was 15 years of military discipline etched into muscle memory, countless hours of close-quarters combat training, and the kind of mental conditioning that rewires fear into focus. 2 tables away, 3 men in their late 20s had been drinking since before noon. Their names were Blake, Trevor, and Mason, names that carried no weight in the room until they decided to make themselves noticeable. Their voices grew louder with every refill, their jokes cruder, their confidence inflated by alcohol and the false courage of numbers. Blake was the instigator, tall and broad-shouldered, with a smirk that rarely left his face. Trevor had restless eyes and the impatient energy of someone who enjoyed pushing boundaries. Mason, the quietest of the 3, often laughed hardest, as though approval was oxygen. At first, their glances toward Alina were subtle whispers, nudges, suppressed laughter. Then Blake leaned back in his chair and made a comment loud enough to float across the polished floor and land squarely at her table. A few nearby diners stiffened. Alina didn't react. She lifted her glass of water, took a measured sip, and continued eating. Her lack of response was not submission. It was assessment. But the men misread it. Silence, to them, was invitation. It was weakness. It was a green light. Chairs scraped harshly against the floor as they stood, the sound cutting through the restaurant like a warning bell. Conversations dimmed, though no one openly intervened. Trevor positioned himself casually in the aisle, blocking the most direct path away from her table. Mason drifted toward the window, cutting off another exit. Blake approached from the front, that familiar smug grin widening. "You don't have to eat alone," he said, leaning far too close. The smell of beer clung to his words. Alina placed her fork down carefully on her plate, not hurried, not flustered, deliberate. Around them, the room felt suspended. People watched without wanting to watch. The sunlight still streamed in. The ocean still moved beyond the glass. But inside the restaurant, something had shifted. Blake reached out, his hand aiming for her shoulder, and in that exact second, the dynamic changed forever. Alina stood up smoothly, her napkin falling from her lap. Her hand intercepted his wrist mitter, fingers locking around the joint with precision. The twist was controlled, but decisive. A sharp crack of movement, not bone, but pride split the air as Blake dropped to his knees, a strangled cry escaping his throat. It happened so fast that several diners blinked, unsure they had seen it correctly. Trevor lunged forward in anger, but Alina pivoted, her elbow striking cleanly into his solar plexus. The impact forced the air from his lungs in a violent gasp, sending him stumbling backward into a table. Glasses shattered. A plate exploded against the floor. Mason froze by the window, his earlier bravado evaporating as he realized this was no performance. This was training. Alina stepped back into a balanced stance, her breathing steady, eyes sharp but calm. "Sit down," she said evenly. The authority in her voice was unmistakable. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried the weight of command. And astonishingly, they obeyed. Security rushed in moments later, alerted by frantic whispers and someone dialing emergency services. The restaurant was silent, except for the ringing in stunned ears. When police officers arrived, Alina identified herself calmly. "Lieutenant Alina Rios, United States Navy. Active duty," she said, producing her ID without drama. Witnesses quickly confirmed what had happened. Phones that had begun recording lowered in awkward respect. The officers escorted the three men out, their earlier arrogance replaced by pale embarrassment and quiet pain. As order returned, something intangible lingered in the air. Conversations resumed softly, but with a different tone, more aware, more reflective. Alina sat back down as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. She adjusted her plate, picked up her fork, and finished her meal. The server approached cautiously, eyes wide with admiration. Alina offered a small, reassuring smile. "It's okay," she said gently. She paid her bill, left a generous tip, and slipped on her blazer. As she walked toward the exit, sunlight framing her silhouette, a few diners nodded subtly in respect. She didn't seek applause. She didn't look back. Outside, the harbor breeze greeted her like an old friend. The world carried on, cars moved, boats drifted, seagulls cried overhead, but inside the mariner's table, no one would forget that afternoon. They had witnessed something rare: strength without ego, discipline without spectacle, protection without cruelty. In the days that followed, the story spread quietly through the community, not as gossip, but as a reminder. A reminder that the quietest person in the room may be the most prepared. That respect is not optional. That confidence without character is fragile. And that courage does not always roar. Sometimes it simply stands up, sets down a fork, and refuses to be diminished. If this story of discipline, dignity, and quiet power meant something to you, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because stories like this remind us that real strength doesn't need to announce itself. It simply shows up when it matters most.